Welcome to the Joshua Ngoma podcast for spiritual inspiration and Africa's strategy positioning in global politics.
Identity politics. Africa will do a lot better when we overcome identity politics than we are right now. Identity politics have retarded our progress and eroded our unity of purpose and common heritage. There are some among us who still insist on dividing us based on our different dialects, tribes, and national origin. As a continent, we have always done well when we embrace unity in diversity. We are one Africa, one continent, indivisible under God. If our history teaches us anything at all, it is that tribalism is repugnant and should have no place in our political and economic discourse. Leaders who flaunt tribal identity politics are morally and ethically bankrupt and need to be censured. Politics ought to be a marketplace of big and bold ideas and not identity wars. There is no superior tribe in Africa except being African. A person ought to be judged by their quality and level of contribution to society and not based on which tribe or region they belong. Zambia's night without a president. Any given party in government should be more inclusive in appointing Zambians, regardless of their ethnic group, to participate in the running of the nation. The introduction of multi-party politics and a private sector-driven economy in 1991 by the Movement for Multi-Party Democracy (MMD) government were not a new phenomenon to Zambia. At independence, up until 1972, the country's political system consisted of several different political parties. Before independence, there was the United Freedom Party, UFP, and the African National Independence Party, ANIP. The two merged to form the United National Independence Party, UNIP, in 1959. After his release from prison, Kenneth Kaunda assumed the presidency of UNIP after winning the January 31st, 1960 elections. He remained president of UNIP until his resignation from active politics in 1992 after a resounding defeat at the general election polls the previous year. The other political party of note was the African National Congress, ANC, led by Harry Mwangankumbula, also known as the Old Lion, and he became Kaunda's main opponent outside UNIP. Of the two leaders, Kenneth Kaunda emerged with a great momentum for change and immediately pushed for self-government and determination by demanding for general elections based on universal suffrage. UNIP first emerged as the dominant party and was pushing for national unity based on African togetherness, reflecting the general thinking of many newly independent African countries. Kaunda's argument was that, quote, although independence successfully dislodged colonial rule, its future was uncertain because many Africans lacked the notion of national identity, end of quote. From its inception in 1959, UNIP was a coalition of different interest groups rather than a coherent political party, and was only galvanized by its original intent and desire to dismantle colonialism. Ruben Chitandika Kamanga, leader of the political group from the eastern part of Zambia, known as Umozi Kumawa, or Oneness in the East, became the first vice president of Zambia within UNIP's power game. After gaining independence in October of 1964, the various interests within UNIP began to polarize such that The deepest levels of political conflict emerged within UNIP itself and not with its main rival, the ANC of Harry Nkomola. Zambia has 73 tribes, yet Kaunda was the only one in UNIP who did not have a strong tribal affiliation because his parents came to Zambia from Malawi as missionaries and settled among the Bemba-speaking people of Chinsali in the northern province of Zambia. Kenneth Kaunda was considered a unity builder and not a divider because of his strong anti-tribal politics. By 1968, intra-party conflicts within UNIP reached epic proportions. On February 5th, President Kaunda offered to resign, citing sinister tribally based political overtones and maneuvers within UNIP that potentially caused the likelihood of a national crisis. This became known as the night without a president. His colleagues eventually prevailed upon him to rescind the decision to resign and still remain president by choosing to do something about this scourge of tribalism. The mounting tribal dissent within UNIP worked in Kaunda's favor and gave him the impetus to openly push for a one-party state, but he would let the people of Zambia decide that. He often argued that, quote, multi-party politics unnecessarily divided people and thus impeded national development, end of quote. Kaunda's toughest political moment might have come with the resignation of his childhood friend and political ally, Simon Mwansaka-Pwepwe, from UNIP. In August of 1971, Kapwepwe resigned from the Kaunda-led government as Minister of Provincial and Local Government and Culture and became the leader of the newly formed United Progressive Party, UPP. The formation of the UPP party was a reflection of the inner conflicts and regional divisions within UNIP. Mr. Kapwepwe's UPP predominantly attracted people from the northern part of Zambia, from where Mr. Kapwepwe originally came, but its political activities were strongest in the Copperbelt province of Zambia. New violence and political clashes were blamed on the newly formed UPP party, giving more justification to Kaunda to change to a one-party political system. Consequently, UPP was outlawed on February 4, 1972, and Mr. Kapwepwe with 123 leading UPP leaders were arrested. On February 25, 1972, President Kaunda announced a cabinet's decision to establish a one-party state political system through a constitutional change. Under the chairmanship of Vice President Mainza Chona, a national commission was set up to make necessary recommendations to change the nation's constitution ahead of the introduction of the one-party participatory political system on December 13, 1972. The new vision for unity was one Zambia, one nation. The liberation struggle in the Southern Africa region against colonial and racial injustice was also cited as a factor in the decision to implement a one-party system in Zambia. On the western border, there was Angola and Namibia. On the eastern border, Mozambique, and on the southern border, Zimbabwe, and further south, South Africa. These countries were involved in tough and protracted liberation wars. Zambia shared borders with these countries, and liberation movements like South Africa's ANC moved their headquarters from Dar es Salaam in Tanzania to Lusaka. The downside to this movement was that it became easier for colonial regimes to reach out and bomb Zambia's infrastructure than they would Dar es Salaam. Sections of the plural political system in Zambia also remained vulnerable to external manipulation at the expense of national unity and security. The introduction of the one-party state did not come without resistant protests, notably so from the African National Congress ANC. And without Harry Nkumbula's consenting, it would have been difficult to implement the one-party system of government. Nkumbula agreed to join UNIP under the one-party system. He proposed that since Choma town in southern province of Zambia was the major political center of the ANC, the signing of the agreement is done there. Hence, the Choma Declaration of 1973. The one-party system was put to test when, in 1978, Harry Nkumbula, Simon Kapwepwe, and Lusaka businessman Robert Chiluwe came forward to contest the UNIP presidency against Kenneth Kaunda. At the UNIP Congress, a new requirement was suddenly put in place by a simple show of hands. The delegates voted that a candidate for president should have been a member of UNIP for at least 5 years, with no criminal record, and with 20 supporters from each province amongst the delegates present at the party congress. These sudden amendments dealt the three contenders a severe setback and effectively disqualified them from running for president. Nkumbula had just joined UNIP after he dissolved his ANC party, and Kapwepwe had remained out of UNIP since 1972, when his UPP party was proscribed. Chiluwe could not have raised the required number of supporters from every province, and after he was declared bankrupt, when his bank accounts were suddenly frozen. According to the law, Mr. Chiluwe's candidacy became invalid to stand for president or any other office after he was declared bankrupt. In the minds of many observers, the disqualifications of the three opponents cast a dark shadow on the sincerity of the one-party system. It was now seen as a mechanism to crush political dissent, even within the one-party system, and guarantee Dr. Kaunda's position as president of UNIP and the nation for life. This single incident by itself defeated and contradicted the argument of the proponents of the one-party system that the process was intended to allow greater political freedom under the umbrella of one political party. Regional politics can be based on common challenges and needs unique to a particular region, but should not be based purely on tribal sentiment. For instance, the economic needs of Zambia's eastern province are predominantly agro-based, while those of the Copperbelt province are mining-related. The Rwandan genocide. In the 1994 Rwanda genocide, Hutu militia, because of ethnic tensions, massacred over 800,000 Tutsis and moderate Hutus in cold blood. The rest of the world helplessly watched and looked away. Africa's conscience cannot remain numb to ethnic or religious violence. Africa must unanimously rise to condemn and root out the blemished history of violence and political conflict predicated on origin, tribe, regionalism, race, and religion. Estimated 800,000 people died in 100 days between April and June of 1994 in Rwanda. A group of about 30,000 members known as the Interahamwe, which means those who attack together, mobilized a community by using state agencies, institutions, and resources to execute a genocide of an entire Tutsi community. On April 6th of that year, Rwandan President Juvenal Habyarimana was assassinated, and the violence was sparked by the death. A Hutu by ethnicity, Habyarimana died when a rocket above Kigali National Airport shot down his plane. The Hutus and the Tutsis can only be distinguished by physical differences. The striking ones are that Tutsis are often taller in height and more slender than the Hutus, with their roots and origins traced back from Ethiopia. In every other respect, the two ethnic groups are in essence very similar in language, traditions, and cohabit in the same areas. The coming of the Belgians to Rwanda in 1916 exacerbated the ethnic tensions between the Tutsis and the Hutus. The Belgian colonists introduced identity cards that identified the Rwandan people according to their ethnicity. Overtly, the Belgians expressed their preference for the Tutsis over the Hutus as being a more superior grouping. The Tutsis were favored with a better job and educational opportunities than their Hutu counterparts. As expected, there was growing resentment among the Hutus against the status quo. In 1959, the situation had reached boiling point, sparking a series of riots across the country, with about 20,000 Tutsis killed and much more fleeing to neighboring Burundi, Tanzania, and Uganda. In 1962, Rwanda was granted independence by Belgium, and the Hutu ethnic group took charge. That remained the case for several decades leading to the 1994 genocide. After the genocide, an estimated 2 million Hutus fled to neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC. These refugees include many of those who have since been implicated as having actively taken part in the genocide as Hutu militia. The presence of this Hutu militia in the DRC has been cited as one component that fuels the prolonged conflict there, with over 5 million people reported dead so far. Tribal clashes in Kenya. The December 2007 disputed election resulted in Kenya led over 650 deaths nationwide and displaced 250,000 people who fled from their homes. Mr. Raila Odinga's opposition party, the Orange Democratic Movement, ODM, alleged that the election had been rigged in favor of then President Mwai Kibaki. Based on the official results, President Kibaki had won with a tiny margin of only 230,000 votes out of some 10 million ballots cast. Based on a Human Rights Watch report, the violence degenerated into degrees of ethnic violence. Officials from the ODM opposition party were accused of fomenting attacks on members of the President Kibaki's Kikuyu ethnic group. Local officials of the ODM party, that predominantly consists of people of the Luo tribe, in conjunction with another rival Kalenjin ethnic group, was accused of arranging frequent post-election meetings. The meetings were meant to strategize and facilitate gang violence carried out by local youth targeting the Kikuyu community following the announcement of the disputed election results. In the heart of Nairobi's Kibera, the largest slum settlement in sub-Saharan Africa, the eruption of violence and looting took a different turn. It was not only a dynamic of ethnic clashes, but also that of politics of poverty, best described as, quote, those with nothing looting those with a little bit more, end of quote. In a slum of almost 1 million people, 50% of its residents are unemployed, with a child mortality rate that is about 7 times that of the national average. Kibera is also home to tens of thousands of AIDS orphans and lacks even the most basic of services such as proper clean water, sanitation, and electricity. Perhaps the anger out of Kibera was an accusation directed at a political system that has failed its residents. The poor are downtrodden, witnessed well-documented scandals in which some members of successive governments have robbed billions from the public coffers. Tribal clashes in Ivory Coast. After the November 2010 pause in Ivory Coast, the world's largest cocoa-producing nation and West Africa's oasis of peace and stability, was at the brink of a second civil war in the past 2 decades. President Laurent Gbagbo, who had already been in power for 10 years, refused to hand over the presidency to the widely perceived winner, Alassane Ouattara, in a runoff election. At least 170 deaths were recorded as a result of clashes between the Gbagbo and Ouattara factions. The United States, the former colonial power France, and all regional, continental, and international organizations had declared Mr. Ouattara as the winner. Earlier in the 2002 civil war, the country was divided into a rebel-controlled north and the government-controlled south, amid accusations based on perceptions of political marginalization. Under its first president, Houphouët-Boigny, the country was under a long-term syndrome of the big man political dictatorship and under the weight of deep-rooted religious and ethnic tensions. Ivory Coast's position as the world's leading cocoa-producing nation became a magnet for economic migration from its poorer neighbors such as Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Chad. As a result of this migration, the northern part of the country became predominantly Muslim, and the southern part remained Catholic and animist. Mr. Ouattara hails from the northern region of the country, and Mr. Gbagbo is from the southern part. A whole generation of Ivorians has grown to see the extremism of politics of tribal identity, where recognition of citizenship is defined by who is a true Ivorite or Ivorianness. In 2010, one of the most significant business events in West Africa was the purchase of the Swiss oil company Addax by the Chinese firm Sinopec. Addax was a major player in West Africa's oil trade and a frequent deliverer of oil to Ivory Coast. Was the support for Ouattara by the United States, Britain, and the EU alongside France influenced by the loss of a key Western oil company to the Chinese increased influence in the oil and gas business in West Africa? Was the 2010 election impasse in Ivory Coast an indication of a simmering rivalry between the West and China over Africa's natural resources and political influence? Be the judge. Thank you for watching and thank you for listening. Until next time, bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Joshua Ngoma podcast. Bye for now until next time.